Hello, my name is Andre. I'm a co-founder of BotTalk, and today I'm going to talk about plugins. And what is a plugin? Well, plugin is a custom set of actions that can be added to your BotTalk scenario. And plugins can extend functionality or add new features to BotTalk. And the exciting thing about plugins is that you can write them in any programming language you want, and they can seamlessly integrate into the BotTalk using plugin protocol, which we're going to discuss later in this video. And in order to create the plugin for BotTalk, you need to obviously have a basic understanding of some program languages, and you can and you should also have the access to run your own web server. And plugins can actually do lots of things in BotTalk. You can write these actions that are simple API wrappers for third-party API. You can inject stuff into the response that you are sending back to Alexa or to Google Home, or you can simply replace the whole JSON that you are sending back. So this is the very cool opportunity because you can really seamlessly add features into your BotTalk scenarios without any complications. So let's just dive into that and let's go through the documentation. I'm going to show you what steps you essentially need to take in order to create a BotTalk plugin. So first of all, you want to identify the actions, obviously, because the plugin is a set of actions, and you want to kind of know what kind of actions, what things are you introducing to your BotTalk scenario. Second, you want to create a plugin manifest. This is the JSON that describes essentially your plugin and your set of actions. Then you add your plugin to BotTalk using a very smart mechanism that we created called discovery process. And as a fourth step, you actually have to implement the logic behind your plugin, and we'll dive into it as well. I have written the BotTalk plugins sample. This one is in Ruby on Rails. You can look into it later or while you're watching this video. It's very self-explanatory, and yeah, later on we'll be adding examples in different languages, in JavaScript as well, in PHP and stuff like that. So let's just dive into it and go directly to the first step. First of all, you have to identify a plugin's actions. Well, let's start with a simple use case, right? You want to create a plugin that would go ahead and wrap some of the API functionality. So in our documentation, we use this example with Open Weather API. And of course, you can go ahead and start using get URL action in your scenario right now. But there are some parameters you have to take care of, and keys and stuff like that. And maybe it's not the kind of prettiest code that you get after all. So you're deciding to write a wrapper. So essentially what a wrapper would look like is going to be an action that is going to be called BT Open Weather. This is the namespace that you are giving your plugin. Then you're going to go ahead and put the dot after it, and then the actual action name. So the action name is going to be current. So it's going to obviously get the current weather. And it has two parameters to it. First parameter is a city, and the second one is the units. So in which units the open weather should get you the current temperature. In our case, we're going to use metric, but you can go ahead and use Fahrenheit as well. And as you can see, then we essentially, this is our plugin. And then something happens, and in the next action, we can see that we have some new variables that are also prefixed with our namespace. BT Open Weather, this is the namespace that we're given to our plugin, and underscore temp, underscore humidity, underscore pressure. And yeah, so this is a very nice way to kind of to kind of work with the Open Weather API, don't you think? So this is the first use case, right? The second use case is a bit more complex. What we want to do is we want to implement the suggestion chips for Google Assistant. As you can see, Google Assistant has this opportunity for you to kind of insert some suggestions to a user. So instead of, and additionally to asking the user what city is she in, you could actually put some of the suggestions like Berlin, Cologne, and London. And yeah, this is the second use case. We at the BotTalk don't have the suggestion chips built in yet. And in this plugin, I'm going to show you how you can actually extend BotTalk with this new functionality that our platform does not support it. And how might this look when implemented in BotTalk? Well, when implemented, you're going to go ahead with this action that is prefixed with your plugin namespace, BT Open Weather, and then dot cities. And after that, you're going to have the one parameter which will take a list as the value. So the parameter will be called cities, and it's going to have a list: Berlin, Cologne, London. You can actually put in up to 8 things into chips, so you can put up to 8 cities right here. And yeah, so and then you're going to wait for some input depending on what the user has said or has actually clicked in the suggestions, and then you're going to jump to the next step, right? Okay. In this use case is very cool. So I'll show you how to inject new kind of JSON into the JSON that BotTalk is sending to Assistant, right? So the BotTalk is going to send something to Assistant, but before it does it, your plugin is going to go ahead and inject some stuff into that right before it sends it to an assistant, and then go ahead and send it to an assistant. So this is the inject part that we're going to see in this use case. And the third use case is completely replacing the JSON response with your plugin. And essentially what we are aiming here for is something that is called list templates. So a complete new and customized way to respond, and it's only supported by Amazon devices with display like Echo Show. And your plugin is going to have one action. It's going to be BT Open Weather .list for list templates, right? And then we're going to say output true, which states that your plugin is allowed to completely modify the output, to completely put a new output either, new response, right? And you are sending your JSON directly to the user's assistant or user's Alexa in this instance. So these are the 3 use cases that we're going to go through. First one is a simple wrapper for API. Second one is to inject your JSON into the JSON response. And the third one is to completely replace your JSON, right, that you're sending to Assistant. So once you have identified the actions, you want to go ahead and put them into the plugin manifest. And what is the plugin manifest? Well, this is the JSON format that we created that you can introduce, and it consists of several things that our documentations go through, and I'm gonna go through them very quickly. Service is the name of your plugin. For example, in our case, Open Weather plugin for BotTalk. Description is you want to describe what your plugin does, right? So put something meaningful because it will be displayed in the user interface later on in BotTalk. Then you're going to go ahead with actions. And actions are actually the descriptions of your actions that you are putting in the BotTalk, that your plugin introduces responses to the BotTalk. So the first action is called current. This is the actually current weather for the city. As we started before, this is the first use case, right? So this is a simple use case of wrapping the API. So it has a description as well. It has an endpoint, and it's very important. Endpoint is what your server will actually receive from the BotTalk. So once you put BT open weather, so your namespace dot current, then the BotTalk is going to go ahead and say, okay, where do I have to call the server so I can get the response? So I can get, as you can as we described here, so I can get all those temperature and humidity and pressure values. Where should I call? And this is going to be a post request that BotTalk is sending to your server. And you can put a nice description here. You can also provide parameters that your endpoint is waiting for. So in this case, it's going to be a name of the city and units, as we've seen before, Fahrenheit or metric. And then you want to describe what returns, what your plugin is actually returning, right? So the temp, the pressure, the humidity, the temp min, the temp max, and stuff like that. Okay, so this is the first use case. The second use case is about the cities. Remember, we want to inject some stuff into the response. And what we want to inject are the suggested inputs, suggestion chips, as we call them. And to do that, as soon as BotTalk sees your plugin name .cities, it's going to go ahead to the endpoint that you provide here, weather plugin /cities, and the only parameter that you are given is the cities, and it's going to be an array of city names, as we've seen before. Just a reminder, this is how it's going to look like, right? Okay, great. And the third action that you are introducing is a list. This is the most kind of complex to implement, but the most straightforward to document. Endpoint is going to be weather plugin /list, and description completely replaces output. There's no parameters, as you can see back here. You just say, okay, call this action and output true. You allow BotTalk to completely give the whole the whole thing to your plugin, and your plugin is going to take a control and send back the response. Okay, so once you wrote this JSON for your plugin, right? What you want to do is to let actually BotTalk know where about this JSON, and you do that by adding a plugin to a BotTalk. So this is the third step, and it is done pretty easy in the plugin section right here. And you can go ahead and create your own plugin, and here you can put the name of your plugin, right? Open weather plugin for BotTalk, something like that. Namespace. This is very important. As you remember, we mentioned namespace several times, and this is actually what identifies your plugin. So BotTalk doesn't kind of think, whoa, which plugin is that? Or it doesn't actually take your action for the internal actions. So be sure to provide some meaningful namespace for your plugin. So we went ahead and put BT open weather as our namespace. The third thing is URL to your endpoint, and essentially this is the endpoint where your server will respond with this JSON, right? So you want your server to respond with something like that, and you're telling BotTalk, okay, this is the URL that you have to call in order to know to discover our plugin manifest, right? and secret token to subscribe this request. This is very interesting. So actually you have to provide it, and it's your responsibility to say, okay, not only I provide the kind of URL to my endpoint, but I also want to kind of BotTalk to send a token parameter, and it's going to be secret. So for example, it's going to be ACDF, right? And I already prepared my one, my plugin, and it's going to be discovery. That's where my plugin manifest will live, right? And I put the token as well. So if you go ahead and send it, then you are going to receive back from the server. So you're receiving this JSON back from the server, and this is the manifest, right? So in our case, if we wanted to add this, we would put this URL right here, because this is the one that kind of returns the JSON that we need, that contains the plugin manifest, and we subscribe it with some secrets. Notice here, if I kind of, do something like that, then the server will return an error and it'll say, oh, that's not the secret that you are providing. And once you done that, you want to check and save it. The BotTalk will go ahead and check it if it can actually call your server and stuff like that. We already done that, and after you done that, you get this very nice kind of interface that describes your plugin, that describes all the actions, including the namespace that you provided and the parameters that you actually put right there with the hints what these parameters mean. If you want to change something in your plugin, right? If you want to add new actions, for instance, right? So you decide, okay, I want to put another action in my manifest, and I want to call it another endpoint, stuff like that, and or I want to use another parameters in the existing actions and stuff like that. All you want to do is change it on your server and click this rediscovery button. It will restart the process. It will put the new parameters right here, add the new actions and stuff like that. So pretty straightforward. And now you are actually able to use the whole your plugin right here. Right? You can use these btopenweather.current.cities and .list in BotTalk, and BotTalk will know what you're talking about in your scenarios. But of course, what you want to do is after you added this to BotTalk, after BotTalk knows what they are, you actually want to implement the actual logic behind it, right? And once again, we've written our sample plugin in and put it on the GitHub for you to kind of grab. And what I'm going to do here is just walk through these three use cases and show you what JSON is our server sending back to BotTalk in order for this to work. So the first one is, as you remember, is just a simple wrapper, right? This is the current wrapper that we are introducing. Once again, to remind you, this is how we use it. We put the city right here, and the second parameter is the units, and this is the JSON that our plugin is responding with. Once again, let's check this in this section. As you can see, this is the post request that we're sending to current. Where is current and whether plugin current is coming from? Well, it's pretty straightforward. This is what we provided in our manifest, right? So as you can see right here, the current action is going to call the endpoint whether plugin current. Okay, and then we have to subscribe this with token, and we have to provide two parameters, the city and the units. If you send this request, then you're gonna get the response back from the server, and this is the response that is sent back. And as you can see, the BotTalk will take these values and prefix them with BT OpenWeather underscore, right? And it's going to be for every value. So if you want to use them inside of your scenario, you can just do it like that. I'm going to go ahead and show you one of the scenarios that I created. I'm going to show you the that in action. Here you go. This is the check for the current city. What I do here is I use this plugin of ours, and then I use the values that are coming back to me right here, right? Perfect. And what you wanna, if you're interested how it's done, in this GitHub repository, I put the controller. This is the discovery. As you can see, we're sending the JSON, and for the current, as you can see, we take a city and the units, we put them in the OpenWeather gem that we're using right here, and we are putting we're rendering the JSON right here, right? And this is what this is the JSON that we are sending back to BotTalk. Perfect. This is the simple wrapper, right? The second thing is that we wanted to use the Google chips, right? Suggestion chips. And to do that, we introduced the second action, and we called it, as you might remember, if you go back to our the plugin manifest, we called it cities, right? And this action should actually introduce the suggestion chips. And in order for you to do that, your server should respond like that. It's going to be an object, JSON object, with the key of inject, and then it's followed by the key of the thing you want this JSON to be injected into. So we go to the documentation of suggestion chips, and we look up the key that is going to be delivered right here, and we put our own JSON right here, right? This is the kind of thing that your JSON, your server is sending. And this way, the BotTalk is going to know, okay, I have to inject something in this key, in the payload Google reach responses suggestions, and this something is that what is your server is delivering. And if you look at the code for that, is pretty simple. What we do is we take the parameters that BotTalk is going to send to us. Once again, we define it. Actually, go to the scenario for you right here. We define it like that, BT OpenWeather cities with one parameter cities and with a list Berlin, Cologne, London. So in your plugin, you want to take those cities from the parameters. You want to push this to the new structure, to the new JSON that it will understand with the title and then followed by the city. And then you want to output this formatted JSON with the format of inject, and then the key which you are injecting into, and of course the array with the cities. And yeah, and if you go ahead to Postman and check how it's done, then you can see, okay, we're still subscribing our request with a token. And if you put another city right here, for example Moscow, and send the response, here you go. The response is Moscow, Berlin, and London. So what your plugin is doing is taking those parameters and packing them into the JSON that that will be injected into the response that will go to the Google Assistant. Okay, this is so far we've covered two things. One use case is simple wrapper around the API. of open weather, and the second thing is injecting your JSON into the payload that you're sending to an assistant, right? And the third thing that we are covering is you want to completely replace the whole JSON. And why would you want to do that? Well, for example, there's a list rendering for Echo Show, right? And if you're wondering how it's looking like, it's gonna look something like that. So there's a special template that BotTalk doesn't support yet, right? And you want to put a title and a kind of image right here, primary text. This is the whole list, right? So this is the whole different JSON, and this is the JSON that is your plugin is going to output, right? So you want to put this JSON that is needed for that into the output key, right? So remember, you call it, once again, I'm gonna go back to my scenario. You call it right here, you say BT open weather list, and then please output to true. So you're telling your BotTalk to completely give the whole kind of the whole control to your plugin, and whatever output is coming from your plugin, once the BotTalk sees this output key, right, it's gonna go ahead. Okay, everything that is from this output key, the JSON that is following, I'm gonna send it back to an assistant, in this case to Google, to Amazon Echo Show, right? And yeah, this is a very complex kind of template. There's a type, display render type. You can there's a type of list template too. There are several templates out there for Amazon, and you can read it all in the Amazon documentation. And yeah, and here's your list soldier. Is something that you are wanting to output as an audio once you're doing the display. And we implemented in our Ruby on Rails code right here. We just put it in the JSON like that, in the list output JSON. So it's going to look like that, right? And this is what you need for the render template, and then we prefix it with the output, and yeah, we put it to the server. And if you go to the Postman, and you can see that we have the cities, so we have the discovery, but once again, we also have the list. Okay, I'm gonna go here. You also have a list. You still need the token to subscribe your request, and if you post it, as you can see, we are delivering the complete JSON. And yeah, so and in order for you to see how it works, I'm gonna jump ahead to the first to the actions, right? So first I'm gonna show you the two use cases. The first one is actually suggestion chips that we implemented, and the second one is going to be getting the current weather. So the scenario for that is pretty easy. First of all, in the initial step, we are going to ask a user for, can you tell me what city are you in, right? And we're gonna give him three suggestions: Berlin, Cologne, or London. And then depending on those, we're gonna go ahead and jump to the check weather for the city. So then we're gonna once again use our action that our plugin introduced, BT open weather current, with the city of my city, which we define here. As you can see in the slots, there are 3 slots that were defined, and then with the units of metric, and it's gonna wrap this whole thing, send it to open weather API, and get back to us with the JSON of temperature and humidity and stuff like that. So this is the 2 things that I'm gonna show you on the Google for you to see those nice suggestion chips, right? So I open my simulator right here, and I'm gonna talk to this test app.
Okay, let's get the test version of my test app.
Can you tell me what city are you in?
And as you can see, you have this nice array of suggestions, and I'm gonna go with Cologne.
The current temperature in Cologne is 16.25, the humidity is 36. And the pressure is 1016. Replace the output completely in the next step?
Okay, as you can see, it worked. It did display those suggestion chips. And so the two use cases that we used, the wrapping of API and injecting stuff, as you can see here, injecting stuff into the response that we're sending are working. And the third thing that we're going to test is the list. The list action is right here. As you can see, we are asking replace the output completely, and in the next step we are going doing bt-openweather.list and output to true. So our plugin is going to replace the whole output that we are sending to the Amazon Alexa. So in this case, we're gonna go ahead and say, okay, open this thing, the skill that we put.
Can you tell me what city are you in?
Okay, let's go with Berlin.
The current temperature in Berlin is 17.49. The humidity is 34. And the pressure is 1016. Replace the output completely in the next step?
And we're gonna say yes. Okay.
Here is your list,
And as you can
soldier.
see, here's your list, soldier is what we put as an audio in our JSON. Remember, in our JSON we have this part. Here's your list, soldier, and the list is actually consists of those kind of things, of the placeholder, of the description, of the primary, secondary text and stuff like that, and it's all displayed beautifully right here. So as you can see, we completely added a new functionality to BotTalk, something that we don't support yet, but you wrote a plugin essentially that supports it. So with this in mind, you can write your plugin to do all kinds of things. You can write your plugins to do the Shopify things, to use Shopify API, to use any kind of API out there to wrap it into the plugin. And once again, you can extend a functionality that we don't yet have. For example, the audio playback or in skill purchases, and add it yourself to the BotTalk. We are very excited because it opens these possibilities to developers that we didn't have before in BotTalk, and we're very excited to see what you will come up with. Once again, there is a whole section in our documentations. If you go to our website, bottalk.de, and click to the docs, there's a whole section called plugins, and you can just once again go through this documentation that we've written for you. And once again, if you go to github/BotTalk, there is a BotTalk plugins repository, and there's one sample OpenWeather plugin in Rails. Then you can go ahead and see how it works. Essentially, you can go to app, to controllers, and there's open plugin controller that you can study to actually see and mimic what I've just shown you in this video. So do write the comments below and tell us what you think, and I'll see you next time. Bye.